Hi, Scott here, author of the Aware Athlete book, and I wanted to talk to you today about everything, about the state the world's in. And we all know that in the midst of an electronic revolution, we have Facebook, we have social media of all different kinds, and we have the blessings of that because we have the ability to connect with an old friend. I just did that recently. I connected with a friend, a good friend from 50 years ago. Pretty cool. But we also know, everyone knows this, that we have more superficial relationships than we've ever had. And we have some really unique problems facing us today. Some big challenges. And we know that if we generalize, we are very, as a culture, disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from the environment, disconnected from other people, from community. And we know that when people get to the end of their days, what's important to them is family, it's relationships, it's the quality of life. Today we live in a society, we know this, that's very, very materialistic, very superficial. What does that do? Well, we have a climate emergency right now. We have ecosystems in distress. We have human habitation threatened. It's an existential challenge that's not even well recognized today. It's beautiful to be out here under this tree talking to you today. But what's really the problem? What's wrong with being disconnected? What's wrong with being isolated, individualistic in the sense of being isolated? Well, here it is. We have become very abstract beings. We've become so abstract that we live almost in a fantasy world. And we love to think that we are so intelligent, much more intelligent than other animals. And we love, in fact, to live in our minds, in the future, in the past. We're filled with worry. Sometimes we're filled with stress. I know I can think immediately of times in my life when I've been super stressed. We're filled with pain, chronic diseases. But one of the most painful things I've ever experienced has been a lack of purpose. So as individuals, our disconnection from ourselves is a huge problem. As a society, our disconnection from others is a huge problem. The crisis that we face in the environment right now, it's a huge problem. We could say that that's the number one problem that we face as a people today, as humanity faces today. That's the number one problem. So, I'm going to say that it's actually the number two problem. The first problem, the very most essential problem that we have is we can't do what we want. We can't realize our dreams. We can't live the life that we really want. We can't be fulfilled every day. So, as we said, we've become a very abstract society. In oral cultures, before we had so much written language, before everything was quite as abstract, we would refer to places as, say, the place where three rivers meet by the White Cliffs. In other words, that would be a place name. The Indians, the natives, the indigenous people in Alaska used to refer to Denali as the Great One. That mountain rises 20,000 feet from the base of a valley. That is the greatest rise of any mountain in the world, the Great One they called it. When you can see it when it's not foggy, it's just this immense snow-covered mountain. And you could, if you use your natural intelligence, your emotional intelligence to name it, you would call it the Great One. But what do we call it? Mount McKinley. Well, I think recently we've switched back to Denali. But so that's the difference in language, the difference in our connection with the environment. And from the Great One to Mount McKinley, an abstract name of somebody who lives somewhere else. Or from a place name that is so descriptive, it's so in touch with our environment, to Figueroa Street. So there's been huge changes over time with our connection to the environment. Now, I said that's the number 2 problem that we have. The first problem is disconnection with ourselves. But now we come full circle, because where does that start? I think all our problems start with our disconnection from nature. So I'm going to say one more time, we become abstract, very superior thinking when we relate to other animals, to the natural environment. We think we're superior, we think we're separate, and we think in very abstract terms. Sometimes we live in fantasy. But there are some people that they live very much in a physical realm. They spend a lot of hours at the gym, or we all know stories of athletes, great football players, but their personal lives are a wreck. So we have this idea of we can do these phenomenal athletic feats, or we can do these phenomenal mental feats, but we don't so much have the integration of those 2 things. And this is where connection with the earth, connection with our bodies, connection with ourselves comes in. Because if I'm connected to myself, I am in fact connected to my vehicle of action in the world. So what's missing when we're so abstract and so fantasy oriented, so materialistic, or when we're just oriented to the physical aesthetics and the material aspects of our body, of our self-image, when we're just oriented towards a physical skill, or when we're just oriented towards our abstract mastery, we actually are not oriented towards action. So how do I act in a way to where I can live the life I want to live? And that is by being more connected to myself. And how do I do that? How do I do that? Well, we could look at the actors, great actors on the screen, and they do all sorts of things to embody all different states. You'll see them in a depressed state. They'll be down. They'll shrug their shoulders. They'll look down, and you're embodying an emotion there. But let's not let. We could go into all kinds of states, and that would be great. But let's not get complicated today. Let's just say, right now, I can be aware of my feet on the ground. And in fact, during the day, and now I can be aware of how I'm bearing weight here. I can be aware of my physical presence in the world and what I see around me. And I can do this throughout the day. Sometimes I find myself saying again and again, your situation changes throughout the day. You're here, and then you're there, and then you're there. But I find myself saying sometimes, I'm here. And so just being aware of your physical weight on your feet, of your presence in the place you're standing right now, is empowering. Now, we could go a step further. I don't want to confuse 2 things, but we could actually touch. I could take off my sandals here. we're going to take those off. Okay. All right. Okay. And I could actually put my feet on the ground. That's a different way to be in touch with your environment. It's great. It's actually fun. And this is something that modern Americans, modern Western industrialized societies don't do very much. Occasionally you find a person who does walk barefoot a little bit. But some of us are so isolated, so insulated from the earth by wearing rubber shoes, by walking on natural smooth surfaces, by spending time indoors, that we never actually put our feet on the ground. We never actually reach down and touch a natural surface or a tree. Now I'm actually connected to the earth. So this physical connection, some people have called this earthing, and there's actually scientific studies that show that your health can be improved because we're electrical beings. And so being grounded that way electrically, touching the ground that way, can actually have physical, psychological benefits. It can increase sleep and so on. There are anecdotal studies and actually valid scientific studies that show that this can actually improve your health. And so what I want to say is this is actually a profound act. It's a profound act if we do it consciously. And to not complicate this video, I don't want to make this really long for this first video. But how profound this is to actually consciously contact our environment, whether it's a person I'm connected to, whether it's the earth that I'm standing on. Now, I talked about earthing and the physical benefits that it might have, but again, I could have my shoes on and I could actually be grounded psychologically, spiritually, any place I am. And we very, very rarely come down to the moment. And we very rarely put ourselves aside and just see how we could get something important out of this moment. So I want everybody to think about how profound this can be. Now, when I'm standing here, I'm aware of my feet on the ground. I'm aware of my weight on my feet. I'm aware of the air that I'm breathing. But I'm not standing here in such a posture that I can't move. So we talk about flexibility. What could we do? We could move up. We could move to the left or the right. See, I could look around. So I'm standing in a very relaxed manner, but I can react to my environment. If we take those concepts into a day, if we take those concepts into a week, if we take those concepts into our life, we're going to change the world just by being a little bit more in ourselves, in our bodies. Just by being a little bit more physically, emotionally, spiritually attached to the moment, we're going to change the world. It's profound. It's not done. So I hope you'll contemplate this a little bit. It's been wonderful to be out here and stand under this tree and talk to you for a few minutes. So that's all I have for today, but take it to heart. It's profound. All right, thanks for listening. Go ahead.